Dr. Mehmet Oz, thank you very much for joining the program. Good to talk to you. It's an honor. You know, I do a show that probably has like 0.1% of the viewership that you have. We're trying to grow it. Maybe this appearance would help it grow. But every day we ask ourselves, what do the viewers want? What do they want? Do they want people crashing into each other? Do they want me to hold people to account? Do they want just sort of like honest, brutal journalism? Do they want to just be informed on a deep level? Now you do a show that reaches, I guess on average, what, 3 million people?
Yeah.
What do they want?
What most of us want, and as a consumer I'll say this because I watch the programs as well, is the truth. You can be hard-hitting and a jerk and not be honest. You can be soft and dishonest, but you can also do both of those in an honest way. So when I look at our viewership, our program airs in over 100 countries. We have probably 15 million viewers over the course of a week. So I have to speak to very different people about what's going on in their lives, and I have to meet them where they are. That doesn't always happen by chance. You have to actually spend a little time trying to figure out what are the big pain points that hold people back. So when I study these issues, I realize that there's some problems, for example, around weight. There are problems around energy. If you Google in why am I into your Google browser, the first thing it'll put in there, it'll autofill so tired, exhausted. It's asking why I'm worn out, because we live in a world where people feel that way. But there are other topics that I feel compelled to get into. I think there's a lot of health and science in crime, which is a crazily popular space because everyone can have their own opinion about whether OJ, who was just released, was guilty or not. So when I have Golden's family on, which I just did, and talk to them about what happened the night that he was accused of killing his wife, ex-wife, and her new boyfriend, or what happened subsequently to put him in jail, you begin to get a different scientific understanding of what happened that can educate you in any conversations you're having. So I don't have to stay just in my health sphere. And in general, when people watch us right now, what they're primarily looking for is where I'm willing to tell the truth, where others may not be brave enough to do that. Am I willing to challenge the orthodoxy of big food, because I think we're being fed foods that aren't in our best interest, or challenge your belief system about sugar versus fat and which one you should be eating.
Right.
Or frankly, what kind of diet's best for you if you want to lose weight. All those are places where there's lots of politics going on, even though it's all in the health space, and where having someone put their neck on the line and take a chance is worthwhile.
And I want to revisit what people want and whether you have to kind of make that compromise between what is kind of empirical and what the majority want, right? But big picture, someone like Carl Sagan took, say, astrophysics and popularized it. Now you have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. They take scientific concepts and they appeal to mass audiences. Is that how you see yourself when it comes to medicine?
Both of those are names you mentioned are people that I admire. There's, what billions and billions was Carl Sagan's great line. And growing up, most of us in the scientific community who thought we might want to be scientists aspired to be able to do what he did, which is to take something that is so important and make it cool enough that you'd learn it. Neil deGrasse Tyson's done a wonderful job taking it to the next level as well, with ideas that can be complex to understand but are eminently comprehensible if done correctly. So I like to think that I am doing what they have done, but in the health space. I also recognize that health's not just an abstract concept. Health is about a very intimate part of who you are and who you will be, and will dramatically affect the people who you love and your ability to spend time with them, quality time in particular. So it gets into a much more political environment pretty quickly. So when I say political, I'm not talking about Republicans, Democrats, or opposing conservative liberal parties. I'm talking about the reality of how we give advice to people and who should be allowed to do it. The big battle right now is the role of doctors in this process. And as a physician, I'm very proud of my heritage. I'm proud of what I was taught to do. I still practice medicine 1 day a week. I also recognize that I don't have the ability, the tools to give advice as a doctor in an office to everybody who comes in at the level they need to hear it. So I feel strongly that education on television, online, and new technologies, and our phones in particular, should be allowed to educate us and customize their advice to us based on what we need the most. So if I'm a diabetic who has the ability to lose weight and therefore can get rid of my diabetes, which will happen in many people if they do lose their weight, that I'll be able to sort of dance the process. So I want to go ahead and take some chances and push and nudge and lobby for the for the right things to happen. Great example is sugar in our diet. There's a lot of money behind selling sugar.
Right.
But more importantly, the money's not just because people making sugar, it's because products are bought that have sugar in them. So we manufacture products with lots of sugar, and then we subsidize sugar, so it's cheaper than it should be. So these are all things that I want to call people's attention to. You can decide in your own mind, because you vote with your pocket 3 times a day, not to eat sugar. You can lobby your governments to make sure sugar is not as readily added to all kinds of stuff, or at least tell us that it's in there. But if you have the choice, you can, at some level in this process, intervene.
You say big sugar. I mean, people know that it's something that's killing people across the United States and everywhere, especially in the developing world as well, right?
Big problem.
As you have a little bit of abundance, these corporations come in and people are killing themselves with their sweet tooth.
Yeah.
Big sugar, big pharma, is it the same thing in your opinion?
No, they're slightly different. There's a clear health benefit to some of the drugs that are made by pharma. Whether we need all these medications and the amounts we take them, that's a whole separate issue. But I feel that there's an appropriate respect that we should give pharma for developing drugs that do change mankind's destiny. Sugar is a little different. Sugar in a natural form is a completely reasonable thing to eat, a piece of fruit. It comes with fiber, it's perfectly proportioned, your body sucks it into its bloodstream at the level it should be sucking it into. Your insulin levels don't get pushed around because of it. Your hormones therefore can stay stable. So within reason, it's perfectly fine. But if I'm adding sugar to ketchup to make you eat more of it, separate issue.
Does the consensus on health change too much, depending on who holds the levers?
The consensus on health changes because we publicize controversial articles. If I were to publish yet another article saying sugar is a problem, you wouldn't bother paying attention to it because you already know that from yesterday's article. But if I write an article saying sugar and cigarettes together save your life, you're all over that because you think that's sort of cool to understand. So one of the beauties of health is that it continues to change. Lots of investigations are being done. Unfortunately, it also means there's a very rocky road as people go left and right, up and down, trying to figure out what's the best health for them. That's why my belief is that over the next 2 to 3 years, especially with advancing artificial intelligence insights about your health, your personal health, and the ability to customize to you specifically, we're going to be able to advance the ball. So you'll be able to look on your phone and say, you know what, for you specifically, here's what you need to do. And here's advice from 3 people who are knowledgeable in your problem. Pick the one you like. But these ideas over here, they're not right for you because you're not a 24-year-old athlete, you're not a 75-year-old grandmother, you're right in the middle.
And you've said you've tried to push the boundaries, you've tried to be different. In hindsight, do you regret that, given that it got you in trouble a few years ago?
No, I don't regret the decisions I made because I don't think I'd be worth having a show if I didn't make those decisions. I remember having long, detailed conversations with the people I trust the most in this area. It was always the same feedback. Do what you know is right. People will come around eventually. But if you don't do what you know is right, then even if they do come around, or even if they're kind to you initially, it doesn't matter. People will sometimes love you, sometimes they'll like you, sometimes they dislike you, but if they respect you, you're in the right spot. And I feel that in the media space, that's what we crave the most, to be respected, to count. And then people at least pay attention to what you're offering. Now you have to be respectful to them. You've got to share information with them that makes difference. You've got to get it right. You can't be perfect, but as much as possible. But if you're not brave enough to say what you really think is happening, there's no point in being involved in this business.
But if I put it to you this way and I say, well, you know, you're a world-renowned heart surgeon, you teach, you're credentialed to the ends of the earth, you're one of the smartest people around, you're America's doctor, you still perform surgery on Thursdays,
yes,
as far as I
Thursdays,
understand,
that's right? Yes.
So you have all of this, and people see you as a don and a guru. Is it worth throwing this reputation away for, what was it, raspberry ketones or whatever it was that you had endorsed that got the Senate to haul you in? Was it worth it?
Oh, for sure, because I never endorsed it. I never sold anything.
Right.
That's the interesting saga that we live in the modern world is it's very hard to really figure out what you think is true. Because oftentimes you're being served information that's in itself questionable. I never sold a product, period, ever. Raspberry ketones or anything else. And right now, if you go online, you'll see my name associated with all kinds of creams. They're on the creams these days. The irony of information transfer is that it is perfectly legal in most countries to lie about what people are doing, and specifically what they're selling. So all these celebrities now are falsely seen as endorsing products that they've never been involved with, literally, never knew that thing existed even. and then unscrupulous people will take advantage of innocent bystanders, get them to buy products, make a lot of money, and it's still not illegal. When I say illegal, there's no criminal problems. And it actually was the first step to what ultimately became the fake news phenomenon. Because fake news is not about politics, I don't think. Fake news is about money. People write politically charged information in order to get people to click, and the clickbait then leads them to buy products. Because I can be a legitimate manufacturer of a shoe. I can say, hey, get people to come to my website. You read a fake article to get people to click. They end up on my shoe website. I can sell you a shoe. Or even I can sell you an unscrupulous product like raspberry ketones or whatever. And completely fake, by the way. There's nothing in the actual products usually. There's not even, forget about the fact that they're using my name illegally or that they're lying about my association. The stuff that they're selling is actually fake. And sometimes there are things that can be dangerous in there. So it's your health that I'm actually concerned about more than a little bit of reputational blister for me. But unless we get ahead of these things, we're going to run into more and more problems. And this is an existential crisis. The web is primarily protected by a series of laws written in the 1990s, at which time it was believed that the web was basically a billboard. Think about this. If I'm a billboard, how can I blame the billboard guy for someone sticking a little poster on there about child slavery? Right now in America, there's a thriving business in not just pornography, but child slaves who are sold for sex. Completely legal. Completely legal. When I say that, it's not like they were sued and they were able to, they were sued and won over and over again. And you may say, well, why hasn't someone passed a law to stop that? It's because the biggest companies in the world involved in digital trade are lobbying actively to prevent the US Congress, and I'm sure it's happening in other countries as well, from passing laws that would make it illegal. We still have this belief that the web should be a billboard, but it's not. I'm being served most of my news on Facebook. So why would they be exempt from rules that govern other media outlets? You can't falsely claim I did something on this show, right? You can't. And a newspaper that's partnered with you couldn't do that, but your website could and get away with it.
Talking about fake news, somebody who loves to use the term, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, you gave him a bit of a health check. When he was a candidate, how important was that for the public to know his health and the fact that he was a little bit overweight? And you very kindly, gently gave him that advice.
I think it was vitally important. It was a time in the election cycle when health was a big issue. I invited both candidates on. They both accepted. And interestingly, when Secretary Clinton got ill, she withdrew. But it wasn't clear to most people what had gone on with her health. Whereas at the time, candidate Trump very quickly jumped on the opportunity because he'd already been invited to appear and defend his own health. I remember getting asked the question the next morning on the Today Show about whether it was the right thing to do to have a candidate explain their health on a television show. And I thought, well, of course, why not? Why wouldn't I want to go on myself if I'm a candidate and defend my health with my records? It's my body. Why would I let some newspaper write their version of my health based on my medical records? So I'm proud that we did it. I would do it again. I would continue to invite candidates on, especially if health is an issue. Not that I want to pry into their personal issues, but if we have two candidates who are older, and both their candidates are around 70, and they're both making an issue of the other person's health, why not have them come on and defend themselves? It seems like the perfect forum for a television show. You take out the middleman.
Taking that further, should a candidate have a psychiatric evaluation before they run?
Well, it gets into a little bit of a debate about what's normal and not normal. I would offer the suggestion that many people who are willing to put their life on the line to run for politics to have a little something off, and they obviously are driven by big driving forces that might make the traditional psychiatric evaluation a little less important. But this, he had a full medical checkup, so had Secretary Clinton. They were both released ultimately, both of which seemed to check out. So I think in the case of the US election in 2016, the health of the candidates was not a major factor.
You're America's doctor. What are you to Turkey?
A proud son of this country, a citizen of Turkey. I'm a joint citizen of the US and Turkey. I did my military service here. I'm very proud of the fact that my parents live here, my whole family pretty much is here. And my father, who lives about 2 miles down on the Bosphorus from where we are, gets up every morning and talks about how this country made him who he is. A poor kid was able to get educated on scholarship, but was sent to the US to learn. and is immensely proud of the remarkable advances that have occurred in this nation. If you think about the year he was born in, 1925, Turkey at that time had only 2 or 3 years earlier reconvened itself into a country. It had been torn apart after the First World War, and he grew up in the Depression. And in the 30s, Turkey was a very, very poor place to be.
Right.
And this area where we're sitting, which is where Ataturk lived, what is very important in this country because he was able to give hope when there wasn't much else you could give. And then they survived the Second World War. My father's generation died in the war. And they've been able to pull it together. You look around now and see a country whose economy is dramatically increasing in size. They're delving into numerous different areas of commerce. Their airline goes to 120 countries, the most of any airline in the world. They're becoming the major portal for people to talk to each other. And I would offer that if you don't understand this city that we're sitting in, Istanbul, it's very hard to understand the world.
Right.
Think about this. The Roman Empire didn't really just collapse and go away. The Roman Empire moved to Istanbul, in Byzantium, and for over 1,000 years carried the torch of Western civilization. When Europe was suffering through the Dark Ages and Islamic literature was still thriving for part of that period, but collapsed subsequent. So all these things are happening in the world, but this city kept it alive. And when Fatih Sultan Mehmet, my namesake, took the city in 1453 and made it an Islamic city, it continued to thrive as a meritocracy, as a place where people from all different religions and countries could come and live. The whole section around Galatukule, around the sort of the Venetian part of the city, was able, Jews and Greeks and Christians and Muslims, East and West, North and South, you could all come together and you were allowed to thrive as long as you had business, as long as you had something that kept you going. And yet we live in a world where we forget that there are bridges that allow us to come together. And as a Turk, I'm proud of the fact that Turkey could be one of those bridges.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I fully understood Turkish politics, or I don't quite, but I understood it a bit more when I read John Freely's history of the city. He's a Boğaziçi late professor, from the time when it was a Greek fishing village until now, right?
Well,
shaped by its geography.
You mentioned Bosphorus. You know what the real meaning of Bosphorus is? I mean, you probably
tell me.
Oxford.
Right.
Oxford. This waterway behind us was probably a stream until the Gibraltar was breached.
Right.
The Atlantic Ocean filled the Mediterranean Sea, lake, making it into a sea, and then rapidly drove up the water level here. And many argue that the search for the Golden Fleece was actually the Black Sea, because every year there'd be a couple 100 feet of advanced water as the water filled this part of the world. So this is an important place for us to understand. There are a couple it's not just Turkey and Istanbul. I don't think you can understand the world if you don't understand India.
Yeah.
There are different parts of the world I think are so vital to us to appreciate, because so much of our heritage came from there. But we forget that, especially if we haven't traveled that much.
You spoke of heritage, you spoke of people of different faiths. Something that's interesting about the Muslim world is that, if I give you a soccer example, nobody cares about Lionel Messi's faith in many ways. But if Paul Pogba is seen at the Hajj, or gone for Umrah in Mecca, suddenly it's like, oh my God, Paul Pogba's a Muslim, oh, he's one of us, And a little bit of that has happened with you now, so he's a Muslim. He represents us. We're proud of him. Does that irritate you, or is it something you take on?
No, I take it on. I think Islam has a huge opportunity and an obligation to explain what it's really about. It's too easily characterized as people blowing things up, motivated by hate, and doesn't really reflect the religion I grew up with. I grew up learning Islam from my grandmother, who was born before the First World War, had a very deep faith and a humbleness that went along with it. And my uncle, who actually was an iconic figure in the engineering world in Turkey, because he was actually sent to train in Germany. He lived under Hitler in Germany as a Turk, which wasn't such a party either. But brought back to Turkey wisdom in 1944 when he was allowed to return. That helped educate a generation of engineers, and Turkey has thrived, I think, because of some of those teachings. And both of them, again, a very learned man and a woman who had really not learned to read. And she had, they were able to pull together and make it work. And both of them had a religion as their foundation, their faith.
So are you a conduit of civilizations and ideas?
If I had to pick one role that I'd like to be known for having when this party on earth is done, it's as someone who's able to bridge people together, opening their eyes to the wonderful reality that was out there if they get past their fears. And I'll quote the great philosopher Frank Zappa. He said, you know, a mind is like a parachute. Works a lot better when it's open.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you.